This conference will now be recorded.
Yes, sir. Visible, sir.
Okay, so good morning to all of you. Yeah, I hope this is visible now. For next almost 1.5 hours, I would like to discuss technical issues related to the design and development of radio frequency integrated circuits, systems, and sensors. In case you have any query and which is not answered during the talk, you are most welcome to reach me through this email ID, official email ID. This email ID is also available at our IIT Roorkee website. So when we use the term RF, what does it mean? When we are using the term radio frequency, we are basically referring any frequency which lies between 9 kilohertz up to 300 gigahertz. This entire range we are using the term RF. This is slightly different from earlier nomenclatures because their RF was usually used for lower frequency range reaching up to 5-6 gigahertz, not more than that. But now RF is a common term which is frequently used for all the applications from 9 kilohertz up to 300 gigahertz. So if you compare this with the older nomenclature, you will find that another very popular term which you may have heard, that is microwave. So what does it mean? Microwave, usually the given frequency range is 1 gigahertz to 30 gigahertz, but this microwave doesn't convey the actual meaning. So if you use another terminology and that is based upon the wavelength, you will get the correct picture. So what is the wavelength from 1 gigahertz to 30 gigahertz? The wavelength lies in centimeter, 30 centimeter to 1 centimeter. So this is basically centimeter wave. Microwave is basically centimeter wave, and the current nomenclature is centimeter wave because in this frequency range, wavelength lies in centimeter range. Then obviously the another nomenclature was given as millimeter wave because from 30 gigahertz to 300 gigahertz wavelength is from 10 millimeter to 1 millimeter. So it means this is a millimeter wave. So if you use this nomenclature, you can understand that this microwave, micro doesn't mean here micron. Microwave refers centimeter wave. Millimeter wave, obviously the wavelength in millimeter. Then there are various standards, and I hope you may be aware. All are using this wireless LAN. So different frequency range they are allocated for such application, and different various standards they are available. Standards basically tells you that what are the parameters, required parameters for transceiver, wireless transceiver to operate in this frequency range. If you are using an antenna, what is expected from the antenna as far as electrical performance is concerned. If you are using a transmitter, how much power is uh, allowed and what is not allowed, everything is mentioned, and that is known as standards. Those who have not seen earlier, they can search IEEE standards, and these standards, they are basically released by various government organizations, such as in India it is DOT, which release standards. So wireless LANs, you can find 2.4 gigahertz LAN as well as 5 gigahertz LAN. 5 gigahertz LAN, one band is from 5.15 to 5.35 gigahertz, so 200 megahertz bandwidth is available there. Another band is from 5.7 to 5.85, roughly 100 to 150 megahertz bandwidth is available there. One more band, 5 gigahertz band, is located near 5.5 gigahertz, that is also used. Then close to this wireless LAN frequency, 5.9 gigahertz traffic radar band is available, that is used by ITS for ITS application, Intelligent Transportation System application. So it means for designer this poses a very tough task, because for LAN 5.725 to 5.85 gigahertz band is available, and after that at 5.9 gigahertz 75 megahertz bandwidth is allocated for ITS application, Intelligent Transport System application. So it poses very tough specification for RF designers. Then few more applications. You may be knowing that traffic radars, nowadays there is huge demand of emerging technology for automotive radar or traffic radar, or more general term that is called ITS, Intelligent Transport System applications. So apart from this 5.9 gigahertz band, where 75 megahertz bandwidth is allocated for such application, there are other bands also, and one such band is close to 24 gigahertz, that is 24.025 to 24.225 gigahertz. Then one more frequency range, that is 24.050 to 24.250. They are also used for ITS application, traffic radar application. Then 33.4 to 36 gigahertz. This band is also allocated for traffic radar. And you may be knowing that 77 gigahertz band is also allocated for collision avoidance radar used in the traffic ITS applications. Then very hectic wireless activity you can find out in sub 6 gigahertz band, and especially emerging area is 5G. 5G technology in India, you can find that 3.4 to 3.6 gigahertz band. So 200 megahertz bandwidth is allocated for 5G applications. This is for sub 6 gigahertz band I'm talking. Then there are other bands which are open for 5G application, commercial. See, apart from these commercial activities, defense and space related activities, they are as such. So there is no change as far as defense and space related activities are concerned. But major change occurred because of the civilian applications. So we are now entering in an era where millimeter wave is going to be used for mobile wireless communication. So that will change entire scenario. Huge opportunity for designers. So various millimeter wave bands, you can find out that several bands are allocated in United States, European Union, then China, Japan, Korea, everywhere you can find out. United States is 27.5 to 28.35 gigahertz. That is Ka band. It lies in Ka band, and another frequency range which is allocated in Ka band is 37 to 38.6. So you can see here almost 1600 megahertz bandwidth is allocated for this purpose. then 38.6 to 40. So here you can see that again 1400 megahertz band is available for 5G applications. Then 64 to 71 gigahertz band, that band is also open for 5G. You may recall that there is a 60 gigahertz band which starts from 57 to 64. So 7 gigahertz bandwidth is allocated, which is license free band in United States. 57 to 64, that is license free band, and then 64 to 71 gigahertz band, this is a licensed band now open for 5G applications. Similarly, if you go to the European Union standards, they have also started using 24.25 to 27.5. This entire band is allocated for 5G application. If you see the traffic radar bands that is close to this frequency range, because up to 24.225 you can find that traffic radar bands are also present, and 24.25 to 27.5, this entire range has been allocated for 5G application. Then other 5G band, they are 31.8 to 33.4, 40.5 to 43.5. Then you can see that other countries like China, Japan, Korea, they are also having interest in 24.25 to 27.5 gigahertz band, or 27.5 to 29.5 gigahertz band, or 26.5 to 29.5. It means everywhere you can see that Ka band is very aggressively used for 5G application. All the activities here you can see this 27 gigahertz or 24 or 24, 27, 26. This is these frequencies, they are in Ka band. Ka band from 26 to 40 gigahertz band, that is known as Ka band. And other frequency range also you can see that mostly they are allocated in Ka band. So there is huge opportunity for RF designers, microwave designers, or millimeter wave designers to develop low cost circuits and systems so that the overall development cost can be brought down and it can be affordable. So the question is, why people are moving towards millimeter wave or terahertz band? Because 6G, when we start talking about the 6G, obviously that is going beyond this frequency range, so it will enter into the terahertz band. So there are certain advantage and disadvantage when you are moving towards such a high frequency range. First thing is availability of large bandwidth, because you know that bandwidth is proportional to the carrier frequency. So if you are operating close to very high millimeter wave frequency, then obviously you will get more bandwidth, and that you can see that in 2.4 gigahertz or 2.3 gigahertz band or 3.6 gigahertz band, you are getting few megahertz, while the bandwidth allocated in millimeter wave or Ka band, they are of several gigahertz. So this shows that the availability of large bandwidth is close to millimeter wave frequency, high carrier frequency. So B bandwidth is directly proportional to F naught. But you also know that the coverage area, so coverage is basically inversely proportional to carrier frequency. So if you are increasing carrier frequency, you are reducing the coverage. It means the cell size is going to be reduced. Cell size is reduced if you are operating in millimeter wave or terahertz frequency. Data rate, obviously you will get more data rate, because data rate is of the order of f naught to the power 3 bits per second. F naught is carrier frequency. So if f naught is very high, obviously data rate is also very high. Communication data rate you can increase by either using more bandwidth, or you have to enhance signal to noise ratio. And you have seen that more bandwidth is easily available around high carrier frequency. So that is one of the main attraction. Increasing signal to noise ratio at such millimeter wave frequency, that is one of the most difficult tasks. Usually what happens, for a given distance, received signal at higher carrier frequency, they experience more attenuation because of the small antenna size, higher atmospheric absorption, and all these factors, they result in reduced signal to noise ratio. So if you are opting in enhancement of signal to noise ratio approach, that is extremely difficult to implement at such high frequency. So this is one of the more attractive part, that since large bandwidth is available at millimeter wave frequency, people are moving towards that, although they are paying the price by reducing the coverage. So now the question is where such high data rate is required. You can see several applications shown here, and nowadays everybody need high definition video, uncompressed video. So there are some calculations you can see, and you can see that what happens if you are using 2K or 4K or 8K, what is expected required data rate. 2K almost 1.5 Gbps, 4K 6 Gbps to 12 Gbps, 8K 24 Gbps to 144 Gbps. So such high data rate is not possible to get or achieve while operating at lower frequency. So that is also basically forcing us to move towards millimeter wave or terahertz frequency domain. But obviously that will reduce the coverage area. And then application you can see, that is medical application. The operation theater, the uncompressed videos can be seamlessly transferred to remote location, other locations from where you can access or doctors can access. So doctors present at remote location can participate in the operation from remotely itself. So all these applications, they are resulting requirement of very high data rate, and that is forcing uh, operators, especially for example DOT or FCC, to move towards higher and higher frequency range. In Japan, you can see that there is already regulation to operate at 120 gigahertz band. So that was started in 2014 itself, and several services they are allocated. General trend in wireless communication, you can see that people are moving towards very high data rate regime, and I hope you can understand whatever I was discussing, why you can get more data rate by using more bandwidth or enhancement of signal to noise ratio. That is coming from the Shannon's theorem, and Shannon's theorem basically predicts that if you operate at high frequency, then you will be able to obtain high data rate. And use of large high data rate is also resulting in low consumption of power. So you can also see that if you are using more data rate more, then power consumption is reduced. So everything is not say advantageous. There are certain difficulties also. So one of the general concern for use of millimeter wave or terahertz wave is coming because of the atmospheric loss and free space propagation loss. Because this is a wireless communication, so you are transferring your signal power wirelessly from one point to other point. When these high frequency signals, millimeter wave signal or terahertz wave signal, they are traveling through so constituent of atmosphere, they are going to affect the signal because signal wavelength is very small. If you are operating at, for example, 60 gigahertz, wavelength is only 5 millimeter. So because of that, you can see that severe effect of rain, presence of water vapors, oxygen molecules, nitrogen molecules, carbon dioxide molecules, ozone, everything, whatever is present in the atmosphere, that is going to affect your signal. And this this graph shows the this graph shows the attenuation versus frequency. What happens? How attenuation is changing? How signal attenuation changes if you are using towards higher frequency range? This is in gigahertz. So if you are operating at 10 gigahertz, or if you are operating at 100 gigahertz or 1000 gigahertz, how the atmospheric constituents they are going to alter or change the behavior of your signal. You can see that very heavy attenuation you can observe at 10 gigahertz. If you are saying the attenuation is not very large, but if you are using, for example, 60 gigahertz, you can see here this is oxygen. So oxygen molecule, they are having a resonance peak, so more than 10 or 12 dB attenuation you will see because of oxygen molecules only at 60 gigahertz. So different valleys and different peaks in attenuation curve you can observe here. So if you see compute numerical computation, go for numerical computation, you can find out the loss due to atmospheric rain, for example 25 millimeter per hour rain, or because of the fog. 60 gigahertz you will see that 27 dB. This effect is almost similar at 400 gigahertz also, only 1 dB difference you can see, but that is reduced. So transmitted power, you can see there is a huge difference as far as transmitted power is concerned. 60 gigahertz you require 100 milliwatt, while 400 gigahertz you require only 4 milliwatt. So this gives you some idea, because you know that the loss increases in proportion to square of the distance r and frequency f. So loss is directly proportional to 4 pi r square divided by AE. AE, you know that antenna aperture. So it means this loss is directly proportional to r square. In case of point-to-point link, free space loss, you can compensate. How you can compensate this loss? You can compensate this loss by increasing antenna gain. If you use very high gain antenna, you can overcome this loss. So one calculation that is shown here, it shows that free space loss is around 134 decibel for 1 kilometer at 120 gigahertz, where lambda is 2.5 millimeter. And if you use an antenna of 50 dBi, this free space loss can be brought down, and its remaining loss is only 34 dB. So it can be brought down up to 34 dB, provided you are using a 50 dBi antenna. for transmitter as well as receiver. So it means the task is now lies on the shoulders of designers, antenna designers, that you have to design a very, very high gain antenna. If you can do that, you will be able to reduce the free space loss component, its effect. It means you can increase the distance of communication. So what are the usual requirement for 5G? You know that there are three key features, three key applications that is identified by ITU: enhanced mobile broadband, EMBB, massive machine type communication, MTC IoT, and ultra reliable and low latency communication, LLC. And if you go through the entire 5G requirement, you can see that you need knowledge of wireless software defined networking, network functions, device to device communication, ultra densification, radio access techniques, big data, mobile, cloud computing, green communication, massive MIMO, then this important part, millimeter wave and terahertz band, and IoT, etc. So it means unless you have proper understanding of technology or development technology, design methodology used in millimeter wave or terahertz band, it is difficult to survive in upcoming wireless communication era. So concept of portable base stations, they may be useful, and it requires energy efficient system. So therefore, transceiver architecture, for example, multiband and multifunctional transceiver architectures, they may be very, very useful. So if you have understanding how to design a transceiver, what are the architectures available, which architecture is efficient from energy consumption point of view, you will be able to meet the requirement. So this is an area that in this lecture we will discuss the various transceiver architectures which are useful and how to design basically the RF front end for the such transceiver architectures. So we are going to discuss these issues in this lecture. One concept is the advanced multifunctional RF concept. So basically this was derived from a paper which was published in 2005, and this was a project outcome of a project from the United States Navy. They demonstrated in 2004 that the function of radar, electronic warfare, and communication systems, they can be integrated, unified. So if and the single system can handle all the three operations. So that was the basic concept, and they demonstrated that that is possible. So this concept was arrived from there, and then you can see that different, for example, Hasmi, they have obtained a patent in 2005 that how to combine two receiver chain into single one. For example, this is one receiver chain, the antenna, filter, LNA, then filter, then mixture, etc. Then other one, because to process one frequency band, you need one receiver chain. So if more than one frequency band you have to process simultaneously, you need more than one such chains. So this concept shows that how to combine that more than one receiver chain into a single one. So in this patent, what he did, he combined, instead of using two antenna, only one antenna, but operating at more than one frequency band. That is used. So he was able to reduce the number of antenna. Then instead of using two band pass filters, you can use only one band pass filter which can simultaneously operate at two frequency bands so that it can handle both frequency bands. Similarly, instead of using two LNA, they can be combined together and only one dual band LNA can be used. So this is the concept. Then my students, he has used this dual band concept to develop a complete dual band transceiver, and a sensor was developed with the help of that. And you can see here that what he did, he developed a complete dual band transceiver. I will discuss in detail later. Then concept of multifunctional system. Multifunctional means one block is performing operation of more than one blocks. For example, there is oscillator and there is a mixer in the transmitter side. You can combine these oscillator and mixer and develop a single element called self-oscillating mixer. So this self-oscillating mixer generates signal as well as performing mixing operation. Similarly, amplifier can be combined with filter, so that is filtering amplifier, or filter can be combined with antenna, filtering antenna. So this is called multifunctional concept. So my another PhD student, he implemented and awarded degree in this area. So in order to become a good RF designer, what is expected from you? It is expected that you must have knowledge of electromagnetics, you must have knowledge of wave propagation and antennas, you must have understanding of microwave engineering, transceiver design, CAD tools, communication theory, wireless standards, IC designing. So if you see closely, watch closely, what you will observe. You can observe that you need knowledge of entire electronics and communication engineering stream. What are the design tools and how RFICs or RF circuits they are designed and implemented? Usually RF integrated circuits, they are designed and optimized using several commercial CAD tools. For example, ADS is one of the tool that is from Keysight. Earlier it was Agilent. Then you have ANSYS HFSS, high frequency structure simulator, CST microwave studio. Then Spectre, Cadence Spectre, RF Spectre, that is another tool that is similar to ADS, slight difference in methodology, but approach is almost similar. So these software tools, they are basically used. Then you have various technological options. One option is you can go for hybrid RF integrated circuit. Hybrid RF integrated circuit means active devices and their chips, they are available. For example, you can take a gallium arsenide field effect MESFET chip that is available. Chip may be available in packaged form or it may be in bare form. Bare chip is also available. Diodes, for example, if you want to use a diode, say Varactor diode or Schottky diode, their chips, they are available. And these chips, they are developed separately and they are general purpose chips. So you can use those chips to develop your entire circuit, entire system. So that approach is known as hybrid approach because the chips, they are developed in foundry separately and rest of the circuit where these chips are used, they are developed separately. So that is the hybrid approach. Then there are monolithic approach where you can use semiconductor substrates whether a compound semiconductor substrate, for example, gallium arsenide or gallium nitride. Gallium nitride is usually preferred for high power applications, or silicon based, silicon, germanium, all those applications, CMOS, etc. And all the circuit elements you can develop on the same chip, same semiconductor substrate. So that is the entirely complete monolithic part. So both options are available. Depending upon the requirement and cost, you have to take a decision whether you can go for everything on the chip, because the cost in that case is very, very high. Or you can easily use the available ICs, chips, devices, and you can develop your circuit, and you can develop your entire system also. In the case of MIC approach, you don't require foundry facilities, because commercially available chips, they are available. Cost you can reduce. While in the case of MMICs, whether it is gallium arsenide based, gallium nitride based, or silicon based, you can design in your laboratory, but fabrication part need to be done in foundry. So their cost, realization cost is very, very high. As far as designer's point of view is concerned, there is very little variation. As far as designer is concerned, there is almost no variation. The only difference is when you are going for hybrid MIC, since the device, for example, Schottky diode or MESFET, that is already developed in the foundry and you have to use it. So whatever characteristic of that device is, you have to use those characteristics to develop your circuit. So that is the limitation. But in the case of MMIC, since you are going to develop the chips, all the circuits on the same chip, so it means you can also change the characteristics of the device. For example, MESFET, you can design your own MESFET to meet the criteria of your particular application. So that is the only difference. Otherwise, there is no difference. You will find that design approach is almost similar. MMIC designing is almost similar. Then in silicon also there are two approaches you can find. One is high resistivity silicon. So high resistivity silicon design approach, that is same here. And next one is CMOS. So CMOS technology is slightly different from usual MMIC at lower frequency, because that is the extension of usual CMOS design approach used at very, very low frequency in VLSI. Once your chips are or circuits are developed, you have to characterize those circuits. How they are characterized? These radio frequency circuits, they are characterized with the help of a setup. If you are having a chip, then you will go for on wafer probe stations. Otherwise, you don't require this on wafer. The probe station is not required. You can use a regular. You can directly apply RF signal with the help of connectors or launchers, and you can take measurement. For example, if you are characterizing an amplifier, you will use network analyzer for that purpose. If you are using, for example, if you have to measure the characteristics of an oscillator, obviously you will go for spectrum analyzer. So usually in RF domain, if you are going for the laboratory purpose, you need few basic equipments. One is the signal generators, RF signal generator, then spectrum analyzers, then network analyzers. So, and power meter, sensor, If you have, that is okay. So all these equipments, they are necessary in order to complete the measurement setup. At IIT Roorkee, we are having such setup up to 110 gigahertz frequency. So one basic question is that how this radio frequency design is different from digital design, because most of the time you may have gone for digital logic circuit designing, maybe combinational logic or sequential circuits also. So how this is different from RF circuits? If you closely watch the both design approach, you can easily find that whenever RF designers they start talking, they discuss, they always talk about impedance matching. So impedance matching is essential part of any RF design. And most of the time the key parameters, they are power or impedance. RF test equipments, as I said earlier, that they are based upon power measurement, and analysis is done in frequency domain. Spectrum analyzer, network analyzer, they all operate in frequency domain. While in the case of digital circuits, you will not find use of this term frequently, although in high speed digital logic similar terms they are now introduced, but usual digital circuit you will not find use of impedance matching concept, because that is not used at all. And key parameters, you always talk in terms of voltage or current, you never talk in terms of power. And test and measurement equipments, they are also based upon the voltage, occasionally on current. Mostly analysis is done in time domain. Mostly analysis, while RF analysis is usually done in frequency domain. And the major difference you will find that input and output impedances are low in the RF circuits. And because of this low input output impedances, power delivery to next block is efficient. While input and output impedances are very high in digital circuits, and this makes delivery of voltage swing to a block or part. That is useful to deliver voltage swing, because in RF we want to deliver power. That's why the impedance is low, while in digital impedance is high, so it means delivery of voltage is easy. In RF circuit blocks, the current drains are usually higher, that is of the order of milliampere, etc., which are preferred because they are beneficial to deliver power to the block or the part of a given voltage. While in the digital circuits, lower current drains are preferred to reduce the power of the digital signal. So just opposite. If you remember and recall the transceiver architecture, you can easily place a demarcation line that before demodulator and after demodulator. In receiver side, what happens? After demodulator, your signal is in digital domain, and digital circuit design approach they can be used. But before that, it remains in RF domain. So this demodulator, basically demodulator or mixer, you can say, you can identify that this block basically separates one side is RF, other side is digital. Similarly, you can identify in the transmitter side the demarcation line lies in modulator. One side is RF, other side is digital. So The key point is the power transportation or manipulation is required in RF blocks in transmitter as well as receiver, while voltage transportation or manipulation is required in the digital or analog block in the transmitter and receiver. The difference in circuit design methodology arises from different circuit design tasks that you can see from our previous slide, that once it is entered into the digital domain, and before that it was in RF domain, analog domain. So because of that, you have to adopt different methodology. The design methodology in high data rate digital circuit design is close to that of RF circuit design methodology. It means you are moving towards more and more adopting RF methods in digital domain also. So after understanding the applications, requirements, what are the tools, now I will discuss few more things which are essential to understand the design concept design for RF integrated circuits. So those concepts, they are essential. And the first one is the planar transmission lines. Whether you are going for hybrid RF circuit designing or you are going for on wafer design, these transmission lines, planar transmission lines, they are essential part. So you may have heard some of the transmission line, for example, the striplet circuit, strip line or micro strip line, slot line, coplanar waveguide, coplanar strip, suspended micro strip or suspended strip line. These micro strip lines, you may have frequently seen use of this term, micro strip antenna also. So this is very popular, but very popular not beyond 30 gigahertz. So after 30 gigahertz, when you are approaching 30 gigahertz, you start facing difficulty if you are using this technology. Then you have to find out alternative. Then CPW, that is another popular technology, but if you approach to higher frequency, you will start facing difficulty. When I use the term difficulty, what does it mean? It means that electrical behavior of these structures, they are changing. This microstrip, this operates in quasi-TEM mode. Quasi-TEM mode means similar to TEM mode, not exactly TEM. TEM means there is no longitudinal component present. No longitudinal component of E, no longitudinal component of H, they are present. While quasi-TEM, there are longitudinal component, but their contribution is very, very small. So you can ignore it. Why longitudinal component appears in this case? You can see this field lines, electric field lines. So these field lines, when you decompose, you will not find any longitudinal component because they are straight lines. But these field lines which are at the corner, this or this field line, you can decompose these lines into horizontal and vertical component, and you will get a component of electric field in the longitudinal direction inside the screen. And that's why you are breaking the law that TEM wave. So since you are having a longitudinal component, so this is no longer a TEM wave. But you are fortunate that only few field lines, they are contributing in this longitudinal component, and their contribution is not very large. And therefore, in approximation, it can be ignored. But you cannot ignore after a very high frequency. So that sets the upper limit. If you are going in millimeter wave, you see that more and more lines, they are contributing. So longitudinal component contribution cannot be ignored, and this will result another mode, that is a hybrid mode. So it may be a TE mode or TM mode, and your guiding structure no longer operates or supports TEM mode. So that's why you have to either change the structure or introduce some technique so that you can still operate in quasi TEM mode even at higher and higher frequency. Then as a designer, what you need? You need, for any transmission line, you can represent a transmission line with the help of its characteristic impedance and propagation constant. So characteristic impedance, so this graph shows the variation of characteristic impedance with normalized conductor width. Conductor width is this is W and this is thickness of the dielectric substrate. So W by H, this is dimensionless and this is known as normalized conductor width. So normalized conductor width versus characteristic impedance, and you can see that you are not getting very large characteristic impedance. It is of the order of 100 to 200, 100, 140. That is maximum impedance you will get. Similarly, this is lambda by lambda TM. Basically, this is effective dielectric constant, beta by beta naught. So that will give you effective dielectric constant or beta. You can plot again. This is with normalized conductor width. So if you have the information of propagation constant and characteristic impedance, you can represent a transmission line and you can use it. So that is the first task. You need that information, whether software is providing you this information or if you are not having the software tools available with you, what you have to do, you have to generate this data with the help of either HFSS or CST Microwave Studio, or experimentally, if you don't have those software options, then you have to experimentally print various width transmission line, various W width, and then you have to take the measurement with the help of network analyzer, and you have to generate the data so that you have this data that for this particular substrate, for example, 2.23 epsilon r substrate, and if the thickness is 25 mil, 1 mil means milli-inch, mil means milli-inch, 1 inch is 2.25.4 millimeter. So milli-inch, 1 milli-inch, you can find out W, you will see 76.4 mils for epsilon r, 4.54 for 6 for 9. This table you can generate, or if you don't have, then you can use for the standard substrates, you can use this table itself. The frequency limitations, operational limitations in microstrip arises because of the onset of lower order transverse resonance mode. It's not that you can take any width. So if you are taking conductor width W very wide, you may land up in a situation where wave this structure also although looks like a transmission line, but it will not behave like a transmission line. It starts behaving like a resonator. So transverse resonance mode may get excited and you can find out its cutoff frequency and you can decide it. So accordingly you have to avoid, you have to choose W in such a way so that you can avoid the excitation of this transverse resonance mode. Then if you select a conductor width W very narrow at high frequency, obviously this will become narrow and narrow. What will happen? The electric field lines, they will ignore the presence of the conductor, transmission line conductor, and they will be guided by the dielectric slab instead of the two wires. One wire here, other wire here. That is the ground plane and this is the conductor. So if this conductor width is very narrow, what will happen? That field line, they will ignore the presence, and field will, this electromagnetic wave is guided by the dielectric substrate. Actually, it will behave like a T or TM slab waveguide backed by a large conductor ground plane. So it means you cannot choose this W very small. Very narrow conductor width is not permitted, because it will result in TE or TM mode. So your guiding structure will actually operate in TE or TM mode, although you can see that there are two conductors, but these conductors, they will not guide electromagnetic signal in TEM mode. Rather, the slab is guiding. So you have to again avoid the excitation of this TE or TM mode. So you can find out the cutoff frequency. These formula, they are given, and accordingly. So it means if you apply the both conditions, lowest order transverse resonance mode and then higher order T or TM mode propagation, you will see that you have only a limited frequency range where you can operate this transmission line or similar transmission lines in dominant TEM mode. As a designer, you must keep in mind these issues. Otherwise, what will happen? From the software, you can take any value, but those value will not be valid. You cannot take any conductor weight. So conductor weight in a particular range is only in particular range is possible. There are certain issues related to silicon, because silicon, the dielectric constant is very high, 11.8, or gallium arsenide, that is 13.8. So in that case, uh, there are certain issues you can read yourself, because very narrow conductor width, how to handle, that is different from microstrip printed on a low dielectric substrate. If dielectric constant of the substrate itself is very high, more than 10 or so, so it means the conductor width you obtain is not very large. So you can, you have to take into account how to overcome this problem. Then there are coplanar waveguides. These coplanar waveguides, these are the two ground conductors, and there is one center conductor. There is a gap. So, and ground and conductor, conducting strip, they are all on the same plane. That's why they are coplanar. There is no conductor present at the back side. So if conductor is also present at the back side, that is known as conductor backed CPW. If a dielectric material is present at the back side other than your substrate, then that is known as dielectric material backed CPW. If there are two strips only, there is no ground plane, they are known as coplanar strips. These coplanar waveguide, they operate in, they will basically, there are two modes they get excited. One is called even mode or CPW mode, that is similar to TEM, quasi TEM mode. And you can see this, these are the field lines. Dotted line, they are magnetic field line, and the solid line, they are representing electric field line. So from center conductor, it starts from center conductor, get terminated to ground. It starts from center conductor, get terminated to ground. And magnetic field line, they are encircling the center conductor. And then there is another mode which is known as slot line mode or odd mode. So in this mode, what happens? That electric field line, they start from this ground conductor, ignore the presence of the center conductor, get terminated to the ground. So this is the odd mode or slot line mode, and as a designer, we have to assure by uh, selecting a correct value of this strip conductor width and these two gaps, so that this odd mode or slot line mode is avoided. Again, the parameter you require, that is the characteristic impedance and effective dielectric constant or propagation constant. If these two information is available to you, you can use these transmission lines in your design. What are the substrates? So there are a number of substrates, they are listed. There are some plastic substrates, for example, developed with the help of this Teflon. Teflon is fluoroethylene PTFE, polytetrafluoroethylene. That is a polymer substrate. So most of the plastic substrate, they are polymer substrates. Then there are alumina based substrates, that is ceramic substrate. Then you know that there are silicon substrate, semiconductor substrate, there are gallium arsenide substrate. These RT derivatized or FR4 all are polymers. They are all are polymers, and they are basically PTFE based. Commercial name of PTFE is Teflon. So they are mostly Teflon based. They are soft substrates. There are another concept which is known as two-port network parameter concept. I hope you can recall your understanding that you may have studied this Z parameter, Y parameter, H parameter, ABCD parameter. These two-port network parameters, they are useful at low frequencies because the parameters are really readily measured using short and open circuit test at the terminals of the two-port network. But that is not possible at microwave frequency or RF frequency. At what happens at RF frequency, which lies in gigahertz range, the Z, Y, H or ABCD parameters, they are very difficult. If not impossible, they are very difficult to measure because short and open circuits to AC signals are difficult to implement over a broadband range. So short and open itself is difficult. Perfect short, perfect open is not possible. And because of that, you cannot apply those techniques because Z, Y, H, ABCD, they all use the concept that short circuit, open circuit. So perfect short and perfect open, that is not possible for a broad range of frequency at RF. So that's why these parameters, they are not preferred. Another a new representation of two-port network for radio frequency that is needed, and that is given by scattering parameters or scattering matrix, and they are defined in terms of traveling waves. So scattering matrix, scattering parameters for two-port network. So I hope you can understand this. So A1, B1, incident wave, A incident wave, B reflected wave. So 1 means port 1, and incident wave, reflected wave, that is from port 2. And this is a Thevenin source. So source is applying the signal, and scattering parameter, how they are defined. S11. S11 is you are feeding input signal at port 1 and you are measuring output signal is also at port 1 when there is no incident wave from port 2. So there is no incident wave in transmission line theory. How you will implement this can be implemented if your network is terminated by its characteristic impedance. So here A2 L20 means you are terminating this port, second port, by characteristic impedance. So if you do that, you need not to use the short or open. So the reflected wave from port 1 and port 2, they are given expressed in terms of S11 A1, S12 A2, and here S21 A1, S22 A2. So B1 and B2, they are expressed in terms of A1 and A2, and the parameters or matrix S11, S12, S21, S22, they are known as scattering parameter or scattering matrix. And in order to get scattering parameters, you don't require to make anything short circuit or open circuit. Rather, the concept of matched termination is needed. Matched termination is needed, right? So generalized scattering parameters, they are given in terms of power waves, and you can see here that A and B, they are expressed with the help of nodal voltage and current. V1, I1 for two port network parameter. You are aware that usually for A, B, C, D, Z, Y, H, they are all defined in terms of nodal voltage and current. Nodal voltage V1 and nodal current I1. V1, I1, V2, I2. So A and B are expressed in terms of V1 and I1. Lumped circuits can be analyzed with the help of the power waves and generalized scattering parameters. So all the networks for which you have find out the Z parameter or Y parameter, you can also find out with the help of these equations the scattering parameters. Finally, since you are having now revised the understanding, applications, everything, let us discuss some examples of circuit development and system development. So I will show you very quickly some examples of multi-band RF integrated circuits and systems. See, filters, they are most frequently used. So band pass filters. This is a tunable dual band pass filter. You can see that one band lies here, other band lies here, and tuning is also. So in this filter, the filter tuning is under the designer's control. That is developed for 2.5 and 5.2 gigahertz band. Then multi-band stepped impedance resonator. You can see that for this particular resonator, this is the design circuit, a resonator. You can see multiple peaks here. Quad band filter. This represents a quad band. The four bands simultaneously, four bands, they are available and you can use it. This is another filter. This is the power splitter. This is the developed power splitter or power combiner, 3 dB power splitter or power combiner, and this operates at two bands simultaneously, dual band. You can see that one band here, the other band here. This is concurrent dual band low noise amplifier, LNA. You can see here, this is low noise amplifier. This is the device. Here, the transistor device is there at this place. Then matching networks, they are. So this is a hybrid circuit, and the same circuit can be transferred over the silicon substrate or gallium arsenide substrate, and if developed in foundry, that will be a monolithic circuit. Here the device, this is a package device that is developed separately, commercially available. You can see the measured and simulated characteristics of the low noise amplifier. This is reconfigurable concurrent dual band amplifier. Reconfigurable, so it means you can change the characteristics by varying the vector voltage. This is dual band oscillator. There are two devices. They are used, and this generates signal of two different bands. You can see that there are two peaks. The one at 5.24 gigahertz, other one is 3.36 gigahertz. And the oscillator is switched resonator dual band oscillator. So in this case, you can see that there is a device, HEMT device, high electron mobility transistor, and then diode, Schottky diode is used as a switch. Then biasing networks, etc., they are present, and this you can see the output of a spectrum analyzer. Then antennas, they were also developed, patch antenna. So CSRR was implemented inside the backside of the antenna in ground plane, and you can see that it is operating at 2.5 5, 2.5, 5.2 gigahertz band, desired band simultaneously. Then all these developed circuit components, they are assembled together over the same substrate by a student, and this complete transceiver was developed and it was tested, a dual band transceiver, and this is used as occupancy sensor. Occupancy sensor, the concept of occupancy sensor is that if a person is present inside the room, his presence can be continuously monitored with the help of this sensor. So this is the occupancy sensor, and if you zoom, you can see that receiver side, transmitter side, and circuits, they are developed, the layout was developed by the student in the lab itself. There is no commercial part done outside. So only in lab, a regular lithography technique, etching technique, they have used. So here, if a person is entering in the room, no one was present in the room, you can see that no signal was getting. Once a person entered in the room, you will see that there is a variation in both frequency bands, and it measures occupancy sensor. It measures the heartbeat and respiration rate of a person to identify whether a person is present inside the room or not. You can see that different technique, signal processing technique was used. One is FFT technique. So with the help of FFT, it was separated. So heartbeat and respiration rate both were determined. Then wavelet transform method that was also implemented, and that is also verifying the same thing, that heartbeat and respiration rate of a person was determined. So also we reported how to find out the direction of arrival, that is if a person is present, in which direction he is present. That work was also carried out by a student, and that is also possible with the help of this sensor. So this is all about my talk today, and if you have any query, let me know. I will stop here and I welcome your queries.
Participants,
Yeah.
you can ask your queries. You can post through the chat box, please. Participants, please share your questions. I think have sir.
Okay, no issue. So
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your lecture. I think participants of this session really got some knowledge about RF circuit systems and sensors. In spite of your busy schedule, you accepted our invitation to take this lecture. Thank you very much, sir, for this informative session, and hope to get a chance to listen to you in future also.
Okay,
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Sir, can you please turn on your video for a while? I'll take the photograph. Yes.
Just I'm trying to how to increase the size. How to turn on the video?